an island shrouded in the fog of San Francisco Bay, a place that for decades fed the currents of fear, mystery, and legend. Its name is Alcatraz, but to the men who knew its cold embrace, it was simply the Rock. Here, between the Pacific mists and the unforgiving waves, this isolated outcrop hosted the most dreaded prison in America. It was a place designed not to rehabilitate, but to break, to contain the incorrigible. Every man who passed through its gates understood the promise: from Alcatraz, there is no escape. And yet, on a single night in 1962, someone would try, and perhaps they would succeed. To understand the audacity of this escape, we must return to its beginning. When the federal penitentiary opens its doors in 1934, its purpose is absolute: to incarcerate the most dangerous men in America in a fortress from which no one could ever leave. The reinforced concrete walls are over 3 feet thick. Steel grates are driven deep into the bedrock. Colossal searchlights scour the bay from dusk until dawn. Every step, inside the cell block or out, is taken under the gaze of guards trained to never look away, not even for an instant. Life within is reduced to its barest essentials: a cot, 3 meals, 8 hours of hard labor. The sound of the ocean is a constant presence, a perpetual reminder that beyond the stone lay a second wall, the frigid water and violent currents of the bay. Its most famous residents included Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, and Robert Stroud, the Birdman. But in 1960, a man destined to alter its history arrives. His name is Frank Lee Morris. A brilliant mind, an indomitable spirit. A few weeks later, the brothers John and Clarence Anglin are transferred in. Raised on the rivers of Florida, they were tireless swimmers. They did not yet know one another, but fate was already placing them on the same track. After months of silent observation, the impregnable island began to reveal its flaws. Not glaring weaknesses, but whispers of possibility. A ventilation duct, weakened by decades of salt and time. A shift change that left a corridor momentarily unwatched. A sliver of shadow on an outer wall. It was the beginning of something that, for now, existed only in the minds of 3 future conspirators. The days crawled by, but the night ignited the mind of Frank Morris. In the confines of his B-block cell, he listened to the rhythmic breathing of sleeping men, a countdown until the night guard's patrol passed. When silence returned to the corridor, he would begin. Behind his sink, the ventilation grill. Decades of paint had corroded its edges. A tool, fashioned in the prison workshop, was enough to pry open the first gap. Each flake of concrete was hidden in the pocket of his uniform, to be scattered in the yard the next morning, lost to the dust. Then, days later, Morris made a request for a work detail in the laundry. The first piece of the wall was gone. It was more than just concrete. It was a fragment of the very idea of Alcatraz, the inescapable fortress, the end of the line. For in the heart of the world's most secure prison, an impossible thought had taken root. The body may be caged, but the human spirit, in its relentless pursuit of freedom, will always search for a way through the stone. On the Rock, talk of escape was never direct. It was coded in the mundane. Between Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, the words were not of flight, not even a whisper. They spoke of cold water, of currents, of the vicious eddies that churned between Alcatraz and Angel Island. The phrases were banal, yet behind every syllable lay a chilling calculus. How long could a conditioned man survive in the frigid depths? How much distance could be covered before the bay became a vortex of ice.
From a distance, Clarence Anglin listened, memorizing, connecting the fragments.
One evening, returning to his cell, he and his brother John locked eyes with Frank Morris. It was only for a second, but it was long enough for an alliance to be forged. They would need tools, they would need patience, and they would need a way to deceive the guards.
In the months that followed, the trio began their collection.
Spoons from the mess hall, scraps of metal from a discarded vacuum cleaner, a crude vegetable glue brewed in secret from yeast and soap. With these meager materials, they fashioned makeshift chisels. But their true genius lay in the creation of decoys, papier-mâché casts of their own heads. They used shreds of newspaper, the homemade adhesive, and strands of real human hair swept from the barbershop floor. The heads, painted with instant coffee to mimic the shadow of flesh, would lie on their pillows on the night of the escape. The security protocol at Alcatraz called for visual checks every hour, not physical contact. A well-crafted illusion was all they needed to buy themselves time. The excavation proceeded in parallel, behind the ventilation grills of 3 separate cells. Each opening widened into a utility corridor, a hidden artery running behind the rear wall. Morris chipped away according to a precise rhythm, a few careful taps, followed by an agonizing silence. When a guard's patrol neared, he would stop. During the chaos of fire alarm drills, he struck harder, the sound of his work swallowed by the general clangor. The Anglins took turns, their movements a mirror of his own, repeating the ritual with identical precision. The calendar turned to 1962, ushering in a brutal winter. The bay's temperature plunged to nearly 50 degrees, but the 3 men knew they could not wait for spring. Every additional day was an unpredictable variable, a change of guards, an unscheduled maintenance survey, even a new inmate in their cell block. The wait itself could shatter their resolve. And the plan was no longer a choice. It was the only reason to draw breath. By January, the openings behind their sinks were just wide enough for a lean body to pass through. Each man had constructed a small cardboard bellows connected to a plastic tube, a device to gently puff the incriminating dust into oblivion without a sound. During yard time, as guards counted the prisoners, Frank Morris's gaze was fixed on the central guard tower. He was calculating angles, searching for a flaw in the fortress's design. He found it. A sliver of the outer yard, invisible to the watchman's eye. He marked the spot in his mind. It could be the place to lower a makeshift raft. But the chasm was dug, and the illusion was set. Now, they needed a way to conquer the water itself. First, they would have to float.
Within the prison workshop, a desperate alchemy is underway. Scraps of old raincoats, more than 50 in all, are meticulously stitched together with waxed thread. They are sealed with the stolen heat of steam pipes, creating a series of airtight chambers. Slowly, an inflatable raft takes shape, one that can be folded, compressed, and concealed within a bag that could pass for common laundry. By early May, all is ready, all but the night itself. Frank Morris, the plan's architect, listens. In the mess hall, a radio broadcasts the weather, a voice from another world. Moderate currents, incoming fog, a waning moon. The conditions are ideal, and yet he decides to wait. He wants the ocean to be just a degree or two colder, a psychological gambit to convince the guards, so accustomed to the bay's climate, that no one in their right mind would dare attempt the swim. The convicts know the temperature will never drop to truly lethal levels, but their keepers do not. The fateful date arrives without announcement. It is June 11th, 1962. The 3 men, without need for a signal, understand the moment has come. At 9:30, the cell block lights are extinguished. Heads sculpted from papier-mâché and human hair are placed upon the pillows, the sheets pulled up to their chins. Aided by the deep gloom of the corridor, the illusion is perfect. Shortly after 11 o'clock, the ventilation grates give way. Frank Morris slips through first into the service corridor, a dark, narrow gut that smells of rust and dust. Here, the breath of the ocean resounds till in advance in silence, clutching the bag with their rolled-up vessel. Before them rises a web of large, vertical pipes. Frank grips the first conduit and begins to climb. His palms slide on the damp metal, but adrenaline erases all fatigue. The duct grating above, sawed through in the preceding days, yields to a single push of his shoulders. A sheet of metal groans, then moves just enough. A blast of icy air hits the three men. The sky above is almost black. The sliver of moon is too thin to cast any light. From the guard towers, slow cones of white trace their way over the chimneys and disappear over the edge. Crouching, the three men count the rhythm of the luminous blades. 1 beat of darkness, 2, 3. Then a frantic dash of a few meters. In this way, shadow by shadow, they reach the northwest corner of the roof, ready to descend toward the hidden shore. From the gutter, a large drain pipe runs down the sheer external wall. John is the first to go, sliding slowly, legs locked around the pipe until his feet touch concrete. He vanishes into the deeper shade. Clarence follows immediately, without a word. Frank remains for a final moment. He closes the hatch, leaving behind him the rock and its legend of invincibility. Whether they were swallowed by the cold, dark water or found a distant shore, they had already accomplished the impossible, dissolving from a place built to hold men forever, transforming from prisoners into myth. At the stroke of midnight, 3 figures move through the silence, following the paved service road behind the main building. They skirt the old warehouses, heading for the zone of the power plant, toward the island's darkest and most isolated shore. There, hidden behind rocks and service installations, they open their satchel and unroll the raft, a vessel painstakingly stitched together from more than 50 prison-issue raincoats. John Anglin produces the bellows, an old musical concertina, its soul repurposed into a pump. He connects a rubber hose to the valve, the folds of waxed canvas less than 3 minutes. The main chamber is rigid, the seams hold. Next, the 2 life preservers, a last-minute decision. Frank Morris steadies the raft as the Anglin brothers slide it into the water. They push off. In seconds, all 3 are aboard. The current seizes them immediately, dragging the small craft west-northwest. The lights of San Francisco appear as a trembling mirage in the fog. The wind is sharp, the spray stings their faces, but no one speaks. Every ounce of energy is dedicated to paddling, to staying warm, to ignoring the fear that whispers of hypothermia and sharks. At dawn, 6 hours later, the alarm finally sounds. Sirens shatter the morning silence. Coast Guard patrol boats begin their search as helicopters scour the bay from above. In Frank Morris's cell, a papier-mâché head cracks under a guard's flashlight, revealing the elaborate deception. The largest manhunt the bay has ever seen begins. As the morning tide rises, a life preserver is found. Then shreds of yellow fabric, perhaps from the raft. But of the 3 men, there is no trace. The official conclusion is that the fugitives drowned, dragged out to the open ocean, or consumed by the cold. But there are no bodies, and the absence of bodies creates a space for a myth to grow. The story travels up the coast, crosses state lines, and lands in the nation's newsrooms. Some claim the three men simply vanished into the fog forever. Others swear they saw them in Mexico, fleeting figures glimpsed behind dusty storefront windows. Investigators chase hundreds of leads, but each one turns cold. The Anglin's mother receives postcards with no return address. "We are well," they read in an uncertain script. Are they genuine messages of survival, or a cruel, elaborate hoax? Months pass. The prison warden files a conclusive report. Probable drowning. The dossier does not convince everyone, but those in command require certainty. A fortress billed as inescapable cannot be allowed to fail. In 1963, Alcatraz closes its doors for good. The headlines cite prohibitively high operating costs, but some suspect the escape had undermined the penitentiary's reputation beyond repair. The years bleed into decades. The facts recede, leaving only the legend. A story sustained not by what is known, but by the powerful and enduring mystery of what is not. In 1979, the Federal Bureau of Investigation archived the case. There was no definitive proof of death. For 17 years, the fate of the Alcatraz escapees remained a cold, silent file. Then, in 2013, a letter emerged from the shadows, attributed to John Anglin. Its message was a tremor through history. "We made it," it read. "Frank died in 2008. Clarence died in 2011. The author claimed to be 79 years old, ill with cancer, and in need of medical care. Forensic experts descended upon the evidence. They scrutinized the ink, the loops and strokes of the handwriting, the faint traces of DNA on a postage stamp. The results were inconclusive. The mystery remained suspended, a line cast between two shores that refused to touch. Today, Alcatraz is a monument to its own past. Tourists walk the cell blocks, their ears filled with the recorded footsteps of long-vanished guards, the disembodied voice of a prisoner, the percussive clang of iron doors. In front of the cells of Morris and the Anglin brothers, they all pause. They imagine the compromised grate, the desperate crawl into darkness, the raft stitched and inflated by hand. Some smile at the audacity. Others stand in solemn silence. Each visitor decides for themselves whether to believe the legend or the official record. And perhaps this is how it must be. For Alcatraz, before it was ever stone and steel, was an idea. The idea of an absolute, uncrossable boundary. The escape fractured that idea, proving that even in a place engineered to extinguish all hope, the conviction of freedom can take root. The Rock still keeps its vigil over the bay. Every night, the lights of San Francisco shimmer across the water, a silent, standing invitation. Who can say if, somewhere out there, one of the fugitives ever looked back upon those same lights? Remembering the rush of wind across the rooftop, the sting of salt on his skin, the violent, triumphant beating of his own heart as the raft slipped away into the great unknown. Maybe they did. Maybe they did not. But their story whispers a persistent truth through the fog. That no prison is eternal when human ingenuity and the sheer force of will collide. And so, Alcatraz endures, no longer as a symbol of fear, but as the enduring echo of a defiant dream.